Former Governor Mike Huckabee says the Republican candidates in the next presidential primary should campaign against President Obama rather than each other.
You know, I don't see the other Republicans as being enemies or opponents as much as I do people who would like the same opportunity to challenge President Obama. What I would hope is that all the Republicans could have sort of a, if not a spoken, at least an unspoken understanding that there's no value in us hacking each other up in the primary, because all it does is make it even more difficult for the eventual winner to succeed in the general election. And that what we need to do is to show the contrast that we have between ourselves and Barack Obama and where he's taking the country, not so much the differences, often which will be extremely slight, between each of us. We'll state those positions, and I think the voters are smart enough to figure out where the differences are without us trying to shine some spotlight on a tiny portion of it, often greatly distorted from reality.
Huckabee also says President Obama can be beaten in the next presidential election.
He's going to be tough. You know, I made some comments last week that were interpreted to say that it was like he was impossible, and people took that to mean that I wasn't going to run because I thought nobody could beat Obama. That's not what I said, so let me say it again. I think he can be beaten. I think there's a likelihood he will be beaten because the electoral map has dramatically shifted. States like Ohio, Florida, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Virginia are now more likely to be in a Republican column than they are to be in a Democratic column. Those states alone turn the election completely. But having said that, I'm just speaking the reality that when Republicans act giddy and start measuring the drapes, you know, for the family quarters, I just want to remind them that this guy's going to be sitting on $1 billion in a campaign fund, and he is the incumbent president. And while the Republicans are battling it out in what will be a very protracted primary, unlike the one 4 years ago that was all front-loaded, it was over in 60 days, and for some people it was over less than that. This is going to go out for a while for two reasons. One, the calendar has been stretched dramatically from where it was 4 years ago, and the second one is that states that were all winner-take-all are now proportionate. So nobody's going to be able to sweep up all the delegates in the first few. The mechanics of the campaign are going to be dramatically different than 4 years ago. And for all the people who say, you're sure getting a late start, I asked a reporter the other day who talked about how late it was. I said, let me ask you, how many other candidates are out there announced yet? He paused. He said, nobody. I said, okay, who's late? Why would we jump into something, any of us, if in order to sustain a campaign, you've backloaded your cost and infrastructure to a degree you can't sustain it?
Huckabee's comments were made during a Newsmakers program here at the National Press Club. Nicholas Balassi, CNSnews.com, Washington.